Thanks, Glenn. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee for organising all of this. It's great to see so many of us here today. And today I'm going to talk to you about Sky Metals' Cullarin project, Silurian gold, and when we first did the deal on Sky Metals back in 2019, it was kind of like receiving a present. And today I'm going to go through looking at unpacking that present and some of the surprises that we came across along the way. Sky Metals has 80% of the Cullarin project, and we're in a joint venture with the Develop Group, who have taken over the Heron stake in it since Heron went into administration. Quick disclaimer. So the Cullarin project is down in Goulburn and sits adjacent to the Lake George Fault, which runs up through the middle of the tenement. And there's quite a number of prospects that sit in the tenement itself there. And today we'll be focusing predominantly on the Hume target, but we'll talk about a few of the other targets there as well. So this section was really the drill section that got us in there. We were really interested by this wet lagoon prospect. There was extensive work in the 1970s and 80s by North Broken Hill through a number of joint ventures, and mostly looking for base metals up until the mid-1980s, when they reassayed a few of the holes for gold. And hole 17 on that section is where they first found the gold in the area. And yeah, very impressive, broad gold intercept, well over a gram, and some really nice high-grade type stuff there. And you can see where that section lies now is right under the realignment of the Hume Highway. So obviously the Hume Highway wasn't there in the 1980s, today it is there. And that really got us motivated to do this and get in there quickly and do some validation work. And the idea was to do some validation work, show that this idea had some legs to it, and then push out into the rest of the tenement and move away from that area of intensive infrastructure. And what we noticed doing a lit review, you can see this map here from the Golden Cross put together in 2003, and there's numerous coincident IP magnetic responses and historic soil responses as well that we thought were characteristic of these systems, of these gold-bearing VMS systems. And so we were keen to validate the previous work and then move quickly into the rest of the belt and work that up. As we were coming up to do it, putting our first couple of holes in, we were getting a bit nervous about some of the historic intercepts there and some of the historic locations of the collars. So we tightened up our two holes and put them either side of the Hume Highway, and we got some terrific results straight off the bat. 8 metres at almost 4 grams per tonne, and then 93 metres at over 4 grams per tonne. And given we got such a strong result, we were really keen on the back of that to get straight back in and keep drilling there. We thought we'd uncovered something truly significant. All historic drilling was drilled from west to east, and so we came in with a follow-up program and we did the same thing as they had been doing. Here's a photo of the drill core. You can see the red ori line down the middle of it, and we were hitting everything at a really good angle. All the quartz veins there, all the foliation and things all looked to be as we would expect, and it looked to us we were doing the right thing, drilling the right direction. And given that was the first orientated drill core to be drilled on that section, it's impressive that they'd got it right for so long. And so our initial interpretation was that we had a steeply west-dipping, north-south striking mineralisation with several dextral offsets, brittle dextral offsets on it that kept it on the highway. So that's a view of our interpretation after our first couple of holes. And our first follow-up hole was hole 3. The aim of that hole was to really step up and then collar right in the top of it and pretty much hit it from surface, or as close to as we could. That didn't quite work out, and we intercepted what was fairly disappointing gold grades. 20 metres at a gram is still pretty good given how shallow it is, but it wasn't quite as high grade as we were expecting. And we drilled another 10 holes in that program, and all but one of them failed to intercept good grade gold mineralisation. And again, we were getting worried about the data set we had inherited as well. So the hole that did intercept good mineralisation in that follow-up program was hole 7, which we angled to the southeast to get coverage underneath the Hume Highway. And that again hit high-grade gold mineralisation, 30 metres there at almost over 3.5 grams per tonne gold, and very shallow again. So it showed us that it wasn't just a fluke the first hole, there was something to it. But the thing we noticed in comparing the two holes in the footwall to the mineralisation was a very large 5 to 10 metre quartz, pyrite, sphalerite, galena, chalcopyrite, and we also saw visible gold in this large vein in the footwall. So we were quite impressed to see that, and the fact that we saw it twice meant we could start to have a bit of a model with it and see if we could come up with a new interpretation. And we're very fortunate these days to have some great 3D modelling packages to use. And that's a photo of that quartz vein from hole 7. So it starts at around 84 metres there and goes down to around 90 metres. It's quite difficult to drill in places, particularly where it's weathered. The sulphide matrix breaks away and you pretty much end up with a gravel in the ground. So OFA Drilling did a great job getting as much as they could in the tubes there. So our collars again, we knew if we were going to go back we had to fix those up. So we started a big investigation into looking into where these historic collars were. And our first job was to go back and get all of the original coordinates for those holes. And then we found an old survey mark on top of a hill. We found a couple of unrehabbed drill holes and things, and we could use those as control points to then swing the grid and get good coordinates for those collars. And that way we sent it off to surveyors to do professionally. They know about ellipsoids and things that we don't. And they came back with plus or minus 5 metres on all of those drill holes. And that made a significant difference in a lot of areas. You can see hole 33 moved 80 metres. So that made a big difference to us and meant we could now move forward with a lot more confidence in our data. Now that we had confidence in where the drill holes were, very fortunately these drill holes were stored at the Londonderry Core Library. So we went there, we've now resampled over 30 holes there for 5,000 samples, which is probably equivalent to somewhere over 10,000 metres of resampled drill holes. That's about as expensive for us to do as a soil sample, so it's been incredibly cheap drilling, and we've been very lucky to have it, particularly given quite a few of these holes are now underneath where the Hume Highway is. And we took photos of all of the drill core as well before we sampled it, and that proved very important as well coming to our interpretation stage. So here you can see our initial interpretation and then our new interpretation from being able to model that quartz vein in the footwall to the gold mineralisation. And that showed that we had a north-northwest striking, steeply east dipping mineralised lode, and that meant that all of our drilling had been very suboptimal for that area. So now you can see a few holes that we'd resampled there, 35, 28, 32, 24 and 31, all where the highway is now. We had confident locations on those, and so we could check our interpretation with them. This is a section looking through 35 and 28, and you can see the steeply dipping predicted plane of mineralisation, and it's supposed to intercept around 30 metres downhole in hole 28, and sure enough, around 30 metres downhole in hole 28 is a large quartz vein with quite a lot of weathered sulphides and things out of it, and you get your gold grade sitting above that. And then moving south again onto the next section, 24 and 31 both intercepted the plane at around 50 and 130 metres respectively. And again, we could look at the photos we'd taken at Londonderry, and here's hole 24, and at 130 metres, pretty well bang on, we've got our quartz vein again. So we were starting to think, although I was quite sceptical about this interpretation to begin with, we were starting to think we might be onto something. So in our next program, we turned the drill rig around and we drilled back the other way to try and hit this at a good angle. And finally, we were successful. The first two holes hit consistent high-grade mineralisation, which was the first time we had done that successfully at Hume since our first two holes. And we also saw visible gold. For those of you that saw the core earlier in the week, you probably would have noticed that it looked like we were drilling down the lodes in our drill core. That made us quite nervous, to be honest, when we started off those holes. So it was very reassuring to spot some visible gold and feel a bit more confident about what we were doing. And we went on and then drilled all of our follow-up holes now are being drilled in the correct direction and starting to delineate that Hume fault. Over the last few months, with some use of lithogeochemistry and things from the large data set that we're developing, we've now started to unravel the structural complexity in this area, and we've got the central Hume and Hovel fault that seem to run into this zone, and particularly the Hume and Hovel fault and where they intersect seems to be a very important area for localising and concentrating gold mineralisation. And we've also mapped out a chlorite schist unit to the east where mineralisation appears to terminate on. So looking at a cross-section through the Hume target now, you can see hole 2 and hole 7 there, and then importantly hole 21, drilled down at depth, has intercepted strong mineralisation with 40 metres at almost 4% base metals, lead and zinc. So we're getting quite high base metal numbers in this as well at depth, and it looks like the base metals are quite coherent, and the gold is much more potty and spotty and difficult to figure out where it's going. On that section is hole 17, and that was very disappointing. It didn't go a few extra metres. It looks like that fault's rolling over, and hole 17 looked like it was about to get interesting. So now looking at a long section along the Hume fault, you can see in that red dotted line going down the middle there, that's the intersection of the Hovel fault on that plane, and that seems to be where a lot of the mineralisation is concentrated. And you can see hole 17 making a bit of a dent in it, but as you can see from the section before, that is a bit dubious. Our deepest hole there at the moment is hole 31, 32 metres at over 5% lead and zinc, and that intercepted quite a large zone with plenty of base metal sulfides in there, and that's giving us a good target now to be able to run downhole EM on and see if we can pick up and learn more about what's happening. And also on that section, I think you can quite simply see it's getting thicker at depth, so hopefully that trend continues. Hole 30 we actually drilled for a repetition of the structure up hole, and we've still got it open, so we'll be able to run back down and extend it to hit the Hume structure at depth, and that's going to be a very, very significant step out for it. So where to next? Now that we've identified that the Hume structure seems to be controlling mineralisation there, there's a few targets that follow that off to the north, and those are Murray's and Hannon's Flat in particular. The Murray's target is a parallel lode to the Bredoulbin Iron Mine. Bredoulbin Iron Mine is a big iron deposit that was mined during World War II, and it's a copper lode that sits sub-parallel to it. And we've got quite good grades there of a couple of metres at 1% copper, but we think there's targeting to be done there to hit some better zones. So that's quite an exciting prospect. And then Hannon's Flat as well looks like a very strong analogue to the Hume target. This is a long section of Hannon's Flat. It seems to have similar geology to Hume, and Hume as well has a long strike of base metal intercepts, and so does Hannon's Flat. It's hosted in the same intensely altered rhyolitic, to call it a myelinite would be too dramatic, but it's quite descriptive for it. And then to give you an idea of the scale of the Hume target, there's just our current outline there. So we could definitely fit a couple of Humes here, and there's certainly, again, it might be an area of structural complexity that we'll have to figure out once again, but looks very prospective, and there's been very limited gold assaying on a lot of those base metal intercepts, so we're quite encouraged by that we might have something else here that could be akin to Hume. So in conclusion, the 3D structural modelling is something that they didn't have 40 or 50 years ago when they were first drilling this deposit, and it's enabled us to be able to start to unravel the best direction to drill and then to delineate the deposit as best we could. The Hume target does appear to be thickening at depth, so it's very exciting to be drilling some more deeper holes there, and it's exciting to further explore it. And there are numerous prospects. I named a couple of the prospects there, but there are quite a lot more on the actual tenement. So we're excited to get back in there, do a lot more work, and hopefully there's quite a bit more to talk to. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank Kathy Small, Jake Noblet and Amy Spandler, who are here today, and thank them very much for their hard work on this project and all the past and present people who have worked on it. Thank you.